morning, everybody. Actually, technically, as of 1 minute ago, afternoon. Welcome back. I don't think I'm going to do a huge introduction because Erin really needs one, but she is the goodness chick, and what a great name and what a great presentation this is going to be. So thank you all for being here at iCAAD, and thank you so much for supporting us and supporting Erin. Here you go.
Thank you very much. All right, I want to say thank you guys for coming out this afternoon. I know we're day 3, and I know for myself, you're excited, but you're tired, right? This has just been a whole lot of information to take in. I'm going to introduce myself a little bit. I was what was called a SAC, a Student Assistant Coordinator, at a high school in New Jersey for 14 years. With that, kind of on the forefront of addiction, mental health, and all that jazz. I made a decision about this time last year where I was resigning from my position, hopping on a plane with my husband and 4-year-old son, and we were doing a round-the-world stint with my podcast and writing and all that stuff and speaking, which was interesting. So we got back last month, and one of the things have you ever talked about doing something and just it stays in your mind and it's like, oh, it's my to-do, it's my to-do. Well, one of mine that I'm very, very, very passionate about when it comes to working with teams is prevention programs. Now, if I could get a raise of hands, how many of you are from the States? Anybody from the States here? Okay, UK. Okay, anybody else from other parts of Europe? Getting very interactive here. Okay, so prevention programs might mean different things in different settings, okay, and with culture and all that taken into consideration. But I will say across the board, many of our prevention programs just don't stick. And the approach that we have taken collectively is very frustrating. I will tell you, when I started 15 years ago, I was hired. I pretty much went in saying, I'm doing the opposite that I was exposed to as a high school student, right? I am doing the opposite. That makes some people very uncomfortable when you say that. The opposite, to me, works, okay? I'm a little unconventional. I'm a bit of a box burner. Some of the stances and manners of presenting information to kids that just doesn't work are some of these. One of the biggest ones is what I call one and done. Not sure if you know what that means. It's having a speaker come in. And we're getting everybody excited, right? And we've paid a whole lot of money for this person who is probably excellent. But now that person exits the building, leaves, never to return. And I'm not bashing that type of one and done, but if there's nothing put into place for the students who've been affected and who've been motivated, many of them have just been jostled, right? There was an assembly before I left that our district had, and the gentleman was very inspiring, very motivating, went through his whole life story. We had kids in fetal position in the hallway because it had triggered things. What was our plan? What is our long-term plan? And when we have no long-term plan, that's a disservice to the educators in your building and to our students. Long-term works. As a society, we are not patient people, correct? We kind of like, boom, like our internet service. Man, my Wi-Fi, it is taking 3.7 seconds, and I'm not taking it, right? So it's the same thing. It's reflective of our educational system, our prevention programs. We're going to dump some money in, and we're just going to put our fingers together and hope. And I'm not saying that's all of us, and I'm not trying to condemn anybody at all, but what I'm saying is when we're right now, we have so many things contending with our kids, dealing with mental health, dealing with addiction, dealing with things at home that are just heartbreaking, not to mention suicide, not to mention overdose, and you layer it, one and done just isn't enough. Talking at kids, telling kids what is going on, layering statistics. You want to talk about them checking out, and they're thinking about what they're going to be eating for lunch. They're thinking about, everything but what we're talking about. And it's not having any statistics, but when we focus and we just talk to kids instead of having to sit and on their level with kids, it makes a tremendous difference. It makes a tremendous difference. Now, I don't know how many of you guys have ever heard of reefer madness. Anybody? Reefer madness. All right, I'm going to bring on some reefer madness. What is reefer? Yes, boom. I wish I had a prize. I don't have a prize. I apologize about that. So what it is, in the 60s, there was a film that came out that it's called Reefer Madness, right? Very interesting. It was kind of I'm going to say a propaganda of film that was used. And it was pretty much, if you smoke weed, you're running around with with a chainsaw and you're killing people and you're going to die right there on the spot. Now, when we tell kids who are curious, correct, by nature, correct? All right, that you do this once and it's going to kill you, the extreme of it, and it can, right? There's that chance. But when we kind of throw it at that level, and now they smoke weed for the first time or they pop a pill for the first time, and wow, I'm just feeling kind of, I felt pretty good, or I woke up with a hangover, but I'm not dead. What we say is now discredited. Does that make sense? What we said has been discredited. So the reefer madness, trying to scare them straight, just is not effective. And so this is not me just pointing fingers and saying what doesn't work, because that would be depressing and that would be kind of very stressful. That's not why I'm here today. What I do want to share with you is what does work, all right? Every single day, we have kids walking into buildings across Europe, right, across America, and they're walking in with what I call an emotional book bag, right? All of us have them, but they're invisible. Okay, you don't see these book bags. And what happens is when we allow these kids, and this is what the program I'm going to talk about today is, to be empowered by their book bag, okay? Stick with me here. Where it's opening your book bag, and you're taking out the stuff, the heaviness. I've never told anybody that my dad is an alcoholic. I've never told anybody that I've self-harmed. I've never told anybody that I really struggle with how I view myself. I've never told anybody, and the list continues, and if we are all really honest, and if I had 5 hours with you, maybe we could get into our own stuff, but sorry about that. You're like, yeah, we all have stuff. Does that make sense? We all have a lot, and I call it crap. I know that's not a professional word. We all have a lot of crap, and instead of making our kids feel uncomfortable about the crap, stigmatized about the crap, they all have crap in this day and age. Every single one of them. And so what my focus is, and my belief from the bottom of my heart, if we get kids to tap into that, things that they've really never tapped into before, because it's embarrassing. It's personal. For all of us, if we went through and talked about it, it's uncomfortable, right? And we're adults. Now you talk to a 16-year-old kid, it's some pretty heavy stuff, correct? It's heavy stuff. But what the main component when it comes to having an effective prevention program is relationships. So when we talk about one and done, when we talk about programs, we need to have a vision that includes relationships, positive relationships. Every single day, our kids are inundated in a way we cannot comprehend. 24/7, right? When there was drama going on back in high school for us, it was like somebody passed a note, we talked about it, in the hallway. Now it comes to them. The pressure to look a certain way is they're saturated with it through social media in so many different forms. But now what if we talk about, when you guys think about peer pressure, what comes to mind? Instagram? Instagram. What else? Making this interactive, baby. I'm going to make some eye contact. Comparisons. Would you usually say when we think about peer pressure, we think about it in a negative context, right? What if we made it a positive context? What if it's positive peer pressure? And this is where I want you guys to stick with me, because it's like, what is she talking about? Crazy American. Stick with me here, all right? That it's positive peer pressure. You're creating a culture and a climate within a school, whether that's in the States we call it a high school or middle school, and that's usually between 12 and 18 years of age. They have so much peer pressure in a negative context. If we flip it upside down and we make it positive, what does that look like? Well, what it looks like is having people within the school, staff, a counselor, right, inviting students who have been selected, okay, we call this handpicked when you initially start, to be a part of a program that is the opposite of just say no to drugs. I don't know if you guys have ever heard that term. Just say no. Wow, way to have them run out the door, right? I say what I call it, I say peace out. They don't want to be a part, just say no. So what is it? It's rephrasing something, being part of a program that is not just about drugs, right? Because when we deal with addiction, is it solely we're talking about addiction? It's a gazillion things, right? We're human beings. So and that's the really cool part of it. And what a term, and I'm the goodness chick, right, is goodness. It's allowing our kids to get excited about life and being part of the goodness, right? And I know that might come across as cheesy to some of you guys. Well, what does that mean? It's getting them excited about living. We have so many people who are not excited about living. It makes my heart ache. And why so many of our kids, right? I've looked at kids, and they'll be in my office, and I'll say, "We'll get you high." And they're like, "Oh my God, please don't ask me that. Don't ask," right? Well, their automatic thought is, what? Alcohol, pills. No, we got to rephrase that. It's life. What's your passion? And when we don't have passions, we're in trouble. We have too many kids who don't have passions. And this is what part of this vision of a prevention program that works. It's not just don't do drugs. We're rephrasing it to make good decisions. Make good decisions and get high on life. Get high on life. And when we kind of light the fire with that, right? Because we could talk about it. I could be sitting here in front of a room full of students and saying, get high on life. Well, what the heck does that mean, right? The drug lady's getting all crazy on me right here, right? That's what my kids used to call me. Let me show you what it means. So that means it's being effective, hands-on learning, right? And when I talk about these programs, people have money rolling through their head. Like, how much money is this costing? You get effective staff members involved in this. It doesn't have to cost a lot of money. It's being involved in your community. It's getting kids outside. You know, it's not just about athletics. Too many times when we're dealing with young kids, we focus just on sports. I'm not bashing sports, but there's so many kids that their passion isn't sports, right? It could be a pottery class. It could be going for a bike ride. It's just bottom line engaging our kids to begin to get their serotonin levels flowing and find out what gets me excited about life. And not only that, during these times, they're engaging with peers who have been invited to the same group as them, right? When we invite kids to a program through a school, it seems kind of a little bit more important, doesn't it? They've been invited to something, it's not just joining. And how that happens, you're like, well, how the heck do we do that, right? Part of it is tapping into the faculty within a school, right? And asking them about the character of certain kids. You don't want the same type of kid for a program. 10, 15, 20 kids of a cookie cutter kid. What? Because that makes it unrelatable to the rest of the school. Okay, so it's the visible athlete. It's the visible kid that's involved in theater. Kids who really have the ability, and this is how I present it, to be a role model. Okay, you're putting yourself in a position to be a role model, and that comes with a bit of responsibility. It comes with a lot of responsibility, and it's we talked about like Instagram before, what you post on social media, what you do outside of school. And you could say, well, kids would run from the hills when you start talking about it. It's not true. When you present something in a way that you are excited and you're relaying and resonating that excitement to them, I believe with all my heart it can be contagious. I really, really do. We have kids that are in desperate need who just want to be a part of something. And they might not tell you this, but they want to be a part of something cool and good and exciting and stimulating. And when we present that to them, it's kind of an amazing thing. And I've had conversations with people who have said, well, we can talk about this, but what are the long-term effects with our kids? Have you ever thought about that when the different prevention programs that we have within schools? Have you ever thought about, does it stick, does it work? Well, I'm going to show you a very quick video with a few kids who are actually students who went through a program that I did that is really focused on the different ingredients on this that are now adults in the real world. So just going to take like 4 minutes. I want to share this with you because if we do it right, we use the right ingredients, things work. If we have sound, okay.
You got it?
I do not. Let's see, oh, up sound. Here we go. Oh, come
Is it plugged in?
on. I do not know that.
It is plugged in. Let me just see. Can I just see the sound settings? Sound is all the way. Might be. Sound is all the way. Let me just check it on the desk. Is that plugging?
Hi. Erin Lawler Patterson is someone who would always try to instill this message in us to find what it is that can help us cope with life without having to use any kind of substances or anything like that to get by. And I think today, as someone who's entering the field of school counseling.
Do you want me to start again?
I really think it's important. And when we talked about it when I was a senior back in high school, we always talked about finding your natural high. Erin Lawler Patterson is someone who would always try to instill this message in us to find what it is that can help us cope with life without having to use any kind of substances or anything like that to get by. And I think today, as someone who's entering the field of school counseling, 6 years later, I work with high school students all the time, who are hurting themselves by doing, non-beneficial coping strategies. And so finding that natural high, finding that, that way you can just kind of step outside the world and kind of get away from everybody, whether it be music, hiking, sports, something like that.
Our drug squad. When I was a junior in high school, we lost my oldest brother, Matthew, to a drug overdose. And in 2008, they did not talk about drugs the way that they talk about them now. It was very hush-hush. The stigma was extremely strong, and I did feel very alone in the situation, thinking no one in my high school understood what I was going through. When Erin approached me about trying out to be in the drug squad, at first I was hesitant, but I am so grateful that I did, and I ended up being part of that amazing group. I was shown that really good people can make really, really bad decisions, which helped me with forgiveness for my brother and really understanding what addiction truly means, as well as meeting others in my high school that have been through similar issues. And Drug Squad pointed out that it is very rare to meet someone who has not been affected somehow by substance abuse. And now I am a director of a nonprofit that focuses on the prevention of drug use and abuse by the youth in my county. So I think it's safe to say that Drug Squad not only influenced me in high school, but it has made such a great positive impact in my adult life, in my grieving process, in my learning, in my advocacy. So yes, I'm very grateful for Drug Squad, and I would recommend that any youth would have that type of empowerment club to help them really figure out who they are and how powerful their voice really can be.
I'm 25 years old, and I've been out of high school for about 7 years now. Basically, the group brought teenagers together through sharing stories that aren't necessarily normal or easy to share, and they're stories that we keep bottled up inside of ourselves. Really, there's no greater feeling than knowing that you can tell someone or a group of people something difficult that you grew up with, whether it was experiencing physical or mental abuse or being around drug or alcohol abuse. These are uncomfortable topics that we don't normally bring up because we might immediately feel judged on, but it really turns out that most people around us do relate to these stories, and they do have similar circumstances in their own upbringing. Throughout the outreach of this group, when we travel to different schools and different places to talk to kids our age about drugs, alcohol, or literally anything hard that they're dealing with on a day-to-day basis, I've seen the tremendous and positive impacts that it had on people's lives. And
Through Drug Squad gave me and hundreds of other students the opportunity to see the ways that sharing our stories, can break down walls and ultimately connect us. The platform of Drug Squad made me a better and more empathetic listener and observer. When I look back now on my time as a student in Drug Squad, it's so clear to me that it was a stepping stone to me becoming more invested in, curious about, and committed to my students. And when you think about the ripple effects of that, it's pretty magical.
All right, so the program that I ran in the States, can you help me where I could just get back to the next slide? Thank you. It was called Drug Squad. But the premise of a prevention program that I believe in my heart that really sticks is allowing kids, and this takes time, this takes commitment, and them having a level of trust, is being able to share where they're at. And kids, in terms of what they're going to be comfortable sharing with, there's things they might not ever tell but they will gain from other people. Because here's the deal, when it comes to what our kids are contending with every single day, we have kids walking through hallways, walking the streets, walking in their neighborhoods, and they feel alone, right? Have you ever felt alone? Okay, we need our kids not to feel alone, desperately, okay? And so what this looks like is having a number of students, and you can kind of have a number in your mind, whether that's 10, I think would be the minimum. The most I ever had was 30, because when you get over 30, I found that the magic number where it just is very, very challenging to become personable, for kids to kind of let their guards down. And what is required for this effective prevention program is training, right? Kids aren't just gonna go sit down in a room and spill their stories. They're not gonna do that. What you need, right, and a part of that, the ingredient is having an effective, caring facilitator. Somebody who's willing within your staff to just be invested, and not that they're there and they're looking at their watch and I was made to do this, because kids can read through you, correct? They can read through you. Somebody that's committed, right? And through these training sessions is what I call them, it's drug trend education, right? And you have kids, I know in the States there's a program called DARE for many years, and there's different programs where we tell kids what drugs are. They have proven those programs are just basically ineffective, but it's how it's presented. I would go into classrooms and kids would hear, the drug ladies here, usually underclassmen, and they're like, I said, I promise you I will leave the room right now, right? If you could tell me the difference between cocaine and heroin in 15 years, not one kid could. Tell me that's not frightening. Okay, and so bless you, when we put this on a level where we're educating them, not with statistics, but drug challenges, drug trends within your community, not my community, your community is different than my community, and talking about it. And it's very interesting to overhearing kids when they're in groups, right? Because you split them up into groups after you kind of chat and share information with them, what they know and what they think they know that's inaccurate. And when you have different trends, especially when you're dealing with pills or when drugs are compromised, which most of them are, what are they willing to put in their bodies and not? And I can guarantee you they have friends who are using drugs, right? So what happens is these kids, I call them ambassadors of goodness, right? Because what's going to happen after they get out of training, and I've learned some stuff, and they hear things, what my friend is thinking about doing, right? I'm going to chat with you about it. And part of the discussion is they're not police officers, they're not therapists, but they're friends. And with so many of our kids, they do not know what the true definition of friendship is. Because it's this. If I tell you, right, that I've been struggling with cutting, you can't tell anybody. But I promise if you don't tell anybody, I won't do it again. What? This is what happens, where I'm now entrusting my life secrets with a friend, right, who's 16 years old and not a therapist, never seen a 16-year-old therapist, and we're making them be a therapist. And so when we start breaking down these definitions to kids about your role in this group is not to be a therapist, a police officer, you're just a human being who wants to do good things, right? We're not even talking about drugs right now. But you are going to be in positions in life, like all of us. Every single one of us, I can promise, at some point has had to make that decision that this problem that somebody's bringing to because they trust me is beyond me. I now have to pass the baton. Has anybody been in a situation like that before? Right? And especially when you're dealing with kids who are 11 to 18 years old, their entire world, their mindset is their peer group, right? It's a peer group. But if you define what a real friend is when the stuff hits the fan, that it's allowing someone else to take that book bag and take it from you. Because I can guarantee they're having trouble sleeping. They're going to get a stomach ache. And you explain it where now you're helping that person. And that's going to involve suicide ideation. It's going to involve self-harm, things at home that depending on what your confidentiality zone is, other people might have to get involved. And you could say as a kid, well, oh my gosh, I don't want anyone involved. But if you turn the table and say this is about helping that person, and you have these people, this group of 10, group of 30 in your school, right, your community, that now know what different drugs are, that now know what it means when somebody needs help. And we're not just going to say to them, you need to pass, the baton. What does that mean? It's providing resource numbers, okay, links to different sites, because I'm going to tell you there's kids who will never talk to an adult It might take years, right? But it's allowing them to be able to pick up the phone and call an anonymous hotline. I know they are everywhere. And when we provide this stuff to our kids, it now empowers them. Does that make sense? Okay, so this is kind of where we're at, and it's allowing our kids now, after these kids have been trained, okay, you've talked about drug trends, you are going to talk about mental health. What the heck does mental health, what does mental wellness look like? We have so many kids struggling, whether it's anxiety, depression, whatever the heck it is. We break that down, we define what this is, because they have a lot of definitions that I can guarantee are pretty off base, right? And we're now combining these things with not just drugs and mental health, but we talk about what it means to be a friend, just like we discussed, and we talk about what it means to really get the most out of your life. Well, what does that mean when I'm 16 years old? We throw back in getting high on life. Where are you? We're meeting them where they are. Where are you? If you're hurting and you're trying to get you're going to go home and I don't do anything. At some point, the bong's under the bed, the pills are in the drawer, and we're going to self-medicate. I'm sorry, that's what we're going to do, and that might people feel uncomfortable, but if we don't find ways to find a release, if we don't find ways to feel that we're somebody and we're not an island, we're doing things to feel better, correct? We're doing things to feel better. That's just the bottom line. So when we kind of empower our kids with all these things and now saying you're a role model, you're part of something that's pretty spectacular, where does it go from here? It's now engaging other students in the school. For instance, with the program that I did, it was having what we call upperclassmen, 17 and 18-year-old kids, now going in and talking to 14-year-old students, whether that's in a classroom, whether that whatever type of group you want to do, and now you're empowering those older kids and getting those younger kids to feel a form of positive peer pressure, bringing that term back, where I don't have to go through this time in my life making really bad decisions, because so many kids think when they get to a certain age, to fit in, to be cool, I need to do things in excess, I need to make poor decisions, I need to whatever, fill in the blank. There's a whole lot of that mentality out there, and when you flip that upside down and you see kids who are part of something pretty big and pretty amazing talking about the power, okay, of good decisions, the power of like being a really good person, and one of the main components that has to be in a program that sticks and works when it comes to prevention is community service. Something that's missing in so many things that we talk about when it comes to education, when it comes to with our kids. Community service and giving back has so many tentacles to it. It's crazy. We have kids who feel like they can give nothing. They have no significance. I don't mean anything. When you have them plugged in and realizing they're helping someone else, also realizing, oh my gosh, this person has this struggle, because a lot of times we can be, especially in our teen years, very focused on ourselves, correct? And how bad my life is and at times it can be very, very tough and challenging. But when we expose them to different facets of life with people struggling, you begin to be a little bit more grateful, and also looking at what can I do to help other people? I have had kids where we would go to a soup kitchen once a month, right? And it would be so amazing to see the difference between them leaving school, going to a soup kitchen, and on the way home. That high was present. I fed somebody tonight. What? I also did a thing, I'm going to challenge you to say this 3 times, called Philly Full-Fledged Feed. Boom. Okay? And what it was kids going into Philadelphia, and it became a school-wide project, right? And we would go in and we had the kids collect clothes. They would have to do it where they didn't buy anything, okay, because we always think about money. You're not buying anything. Go through your closet, go to your neighbors, make a list. Okay, then they made bag lunches. Hopped on a bus, went into Philadelphia, set up shop, and fed about 150 people. And to watch kids, I knew their stories. They didn't know each other's stories. And watching the heart and the heart change and the veil come off of like, wow, I'm going to use an American word, dude, that was awesome. It is a high we do not tap into as human beings enough. It is a high. I, as a human being, Erin Lawler Patterson, I'm addicted to giving back. Might sound strange. I have watched other students that I have worked with now go off to college or university, as we call it here, and start their own programs or get involved, thoroughly involved and entrenched, and they will say, that changed my life. It allowed me, when all hell was breaking loose at home and I couldn't fix home, but you know what I could do? I could work on myself and I could help somebody else. Huge, massive component we miss out on big time. And if we were really to think, because you might be thinking, well, where could we do that around where I'm at? I promise you there's places. We just need to dig a little bit, do some research. Whether it's a homeless shelter, whether it's a women's shelter, whether it, animal shelter. I brought kids to animal shelters. What animals do for kids, awesome. Kids who are challenged with anxiety, riddled with depression, and when you put them in a room with a cat, you put them in the room with a dog. I tried to get permission to have a chinchilla in my room. That didn't go over too well. But whatever it is, animals do something to our spirits. It really does. And it's funny, we have animal therapy, we have art therapy, and too often we get locked into this therapy, right? We're talking one-on-one. Some of the most amazing ways of cracking into somebody, right, is when their guard's down. When they're engaged in something that is just getting them excited about living life, right? We do not get excited about living life enough. We have people, right, whether you're 97 or you're 17, who are just coasting through life. We've got one life. We've got one life. How are you going to live it in a way that is going to knock your socks off? And when we get excited as adults, right, about life, and they see that enthusiasm, okay, whether you're a parent, whether you're an aunt, whether you're an uncle, whether you're a whatever, if our kids see us, they're watching us. Don't tell me they're not watching us. Just coasting, right? Dude, they're going to be blah. They're not going to be excited to be alive, right? We have the suicide level here with men in the UK. It's devastating. In the United States, if I get one more text or phone call about a kid, an alumni that dropped dead from heroin or suicide, we need to change. And we need to change now, and it starts with us in this room. Because I believe with all my heart we're ambassadors of goodness, and too often we can keep our eyes closed or we just get distracted. Life can be crazy, right? We can get distracted. But whether we're educators, whether we're therapists, counselors, whatever the heck we are, to whatever capacity we're plugged into young people, we have a role to play. And I believe with all my heart when it comes to prevention programs, we need to do better, right? I created this program, honestly, just in response to thinking how many assemblies I fell asleep in as a high school student. How I literally wanted to punch myself in the face when I would have someone else tell me, right, don't do drugs, they'll kill you. Okay, I get it, right? Because that's not the approach. It's loving our kids, it's being compassionate, and I'm also going to tell you it's being vulnerable. It's being transparent. The reason I got into this field, right, I was my third year in college, at university, and I lost my 17-year-old sister and her 3 friends to a drunk driver. They were killed in the middle of the day, 11:30 in the morning, and she was gone. My motivation, right, after it took me a few years, was in terms of using that as fuel. I remember starting my job and I was like, there's no way I'm talking about my personal life, right? My sister and her 3 friends went through the district that I worked in. But I'm going to tell you, when I wasn't pride, when I let my guard down and I allowed myself to be vulnerable, some of the most impactful conversations I had with students was with those, I lost my sister. I lost my brother. I lost my mom, because they knew I could relate. And I'm not saying you have to have been through something, but all of us have been through something, right? And it's teaching our kids what empathy looks like. I can listen to you, man. I can listen to you. And when we kind of instill this in our kids through programs like this, they learn to listen. Many, many people are thinking about what they're going to say as somebody else is talking, right? We don't listen. But when we actually feel heard, and you have kids who feel like they're desperately falling through the cracks and that they're heard, it's life altering. It's not about up until I'm 18 years old, this is what it's going to have an effect on me. These guys who spoke in this chat range from 24 to 30, right? They've been through the program. They have been subjected to what I call goodness. And so whether it be in Spain, whether it be in the UK, whether it be in the United States, ways to come together and start being on the front lines with our kids. And that means being out of the box. That means going and doing trainings. That means, having different types of the kids going and talking to younger kids, community service. It's all, and you could be like, oh my gosh, that's so much. but it's really not when we sit down and we kind of have a plan. We talk about, there's battles and wars that go on every day, right? Have you ever seen, right, we're going into battle and there's one soldier running out in the field? What would you think? That's crazy. Why would you do that, right? That's ludicrous. Well, that's what we're doing when we don't have an effective plan when it comes to prevention. It's the same thing. It has to be multifaceted, it has to have a plan, and it has to be looking forward. This is going to have an effect for 2 weeks. Well, what? Then don't even have it, right? We need to look at the long term when it comes to this, because that is what works. It's not lecturing to our kids. It's us as adults being an example. Allowing, I believe, big time in group discussions after we've done our spiel as adults in the educational component, allowing kids to break up into groups. That's when things happen. That's when they talk. And then with that, not only are they learning from each other, but they're beginning to establish a level of trust and rapport with each other that does some pretty dynamic things. A lot of us have had different things in life that have happened that disallow us to trust. We are skeptical, right? Especially of adults when you're a kid, you're skeptical. But when we begin to kind of lay the groundwork for that, it's a pretty amazing thing. And it's now what's happening. It's allowing our kids to feel empowered. I'm going to just kind of give you a little bit of an example of some of the, I'll say, ingredients, okay, of the program that I ran. It was conveying an everyday message of I'm not giving up on you. I'm worthless. Everybody else in my life is kind of bounced. Why? I'm not giving up on you. I believe in you. Kids are going to make mistakes. If we sat here and kind of talked about all the things we shouldn't have done when we were teenagers, right? We could take a few hours. You're going to make mistakes, but if you empower them in terms of that they can make good decisions, and when they falter, we just talk about it. We just talk about it. It's okay. I'm not taking you off my list because you've made a poor decision. It's making whoever the facilitator is accessible, right? In terms of I can come and talk to you. If it's when we do the one and done thing, that speaker, they're gone. Now, how do I talk about what's really going on? That's kind of that's shortchanging our kids big time. I believe in follow-up. Having our kids, whatever age that they enter the program, it's keeping up with them, letting them know that you're part of something bigger, you're part of something spectacular, and we believe in you. And with that, one of the programs I started was called Be the Dream. It was an after-school program. We have so many kids who don't want to go home at the end of the school day. Kids that just don't want to go home. I don't want to go to my house. But when we, and it's getting the right faculty member to be involved in this, but it's providing things to do after school. And that doesn't have to cost money. Playing Frisbee, playing kickball, letting kids hang out in a library and making hot chocolate or whatever it is. It's possible to make, and what it does, it's making connections. It's getting rooted with our kids because we have kids, okay, who feel like nobody cares about them. We have kids that do not feel connected. I'm going to share a real quick story with you. At a young man I worked with a number of years ago who just is a phenomenal human being and came from a really rough home life, riddled with addiction, a lot of hurt. And I remember talking with him his final year of high school, and I said, man, you made some crazy changes since freshman year. Like, you're just a different person. And I said, what was it that kind of clicked for you? And he said, you know what, I'm going to tell you a story, Miss Lawler. The kids all call me Lawler. And I said, yeah, what's up, man? And he said, my freshman year, my first year of high school, I was what was called the hoodie kid, right? The kid that had the hood over his head. I had my earbuds in. I would walk through the hallway. And he said, no one ever talked to me. I didn't want to go home. I didn't feel like anybody. I had some really, really deep, dark thoughts going through my head. And he said, there was one day that I was walking through the hallway. And he said, you looked at me in the eye. And you said, hey, man. And I said, but I don't even remember that. He said, it doesn't matter. Because I began to think that every day you had a smile on your face. Even though I knew you had things going on. But you connected with me. And so things that we take for granted, eye contact, I believe with all my heart can save somebody's life. A hello. A you are somebody. It's a hey man, hey guy, whatever terms you want to use. We have so many people who do not feel that they are part of anything, who go home to hell, who go home and they just want to sleep. But when we get them to feel like, man, you are somebody, man, you're awesome, right? And you're not what the baggage and the stuff at home, it's now going forward and being part of something. And that gets them excited. It's, I'm not giving up on you. You are awesome. You are exciting. And the last part of this is the faculty component is really important. If you start something and your administration is not invested, and it's blah, we're doing this weird thing, it's not going to work, because the administration, will grumble. Things will be relayed to teachers, who are the heart of any school. And so what it does, it minimizes the power of it. And so what I did before I started this program was I sat with my administration. You don't need to do anything, but emotionally I need you to support this. This vision is bigger than us. This vision will, not in 6 months, but with time, will change the culture of our school. We went, my first year, to asking kids to join this super weird program, to having a wait list of up to 125 students. It became cool to make good decisions. So whatever life brought you here today, right, for whatever reason, it's bringing it back and getting kids excited about life, feeling a part of something, and knowing they have that little ripple effect that can ultimately, believe this with all my heart, change the world. That's my 2 cents. And I want to leave, a few minutes.
It's like hacking. People want to belong, right? Especially children when they're developing their identity. So it's like hacking that need to belong and perform with positive.
It's reeling them in. When I tell you that year, it was like year 5, right? I'm like, I have 125 kids applying for this. That's insane. I literally had an interview process, but I want to feel a part of something. You had kids who had no voice in a hallway. You had kids that were superstar athletes, whatever it was, and making sure that there were kids who we knew, you do as teachers or counselors, that there was a family, there was whether addiction going on at home or heavy stuff, and a mix of kids who, there was no knowledge of that. And we brought them together, and seeing the spectacular change in these kids, literally revolutionary without sounding too strange, people want to be a part of that. Wow. And one of the main components was, they were surrounded by people who were positive, that had their back. They didn't have every like and interest connected, absolutely not. They were totally different human beings, but it was in here that connected. So I want to leave a few minutes for questions, any kind of thoughts and visions.
Everything that you actually mentioned is something that I'm really trying hard to do with my students. I teach English in Paris. And actually, brings tears to my heart, I would say, because this is something that I've been convinced for years. I've worked in like more than 20 different places. And what actually brought me to psychology is, meeting some students who were going through issues and difficulties. And this is how I realized that being a teacher is not only a matter of teaching something. And that's something that I really am passionate about, really into, but I am really surrounded by people who do not care.
Yeah.
And this is what makes me sad, because this is something that I am so convinced. I mean, I remember when I was in high school, one of our classmates actually killed himself. And still actually still strikes me when I talk about it. Nobody knew that it would come up, actually ending up killing himself, but he was like isolated and everything, and nobody did anything about it. So that's something that is so much like a desire to do something about it. I really feel like I bond so easily with my students, and I'm really learning, the boundaries as well. So I think that's really a fascinating path. But I know it's something that I might not prevent, but I always come to people that are so reluctant to it. And this is so frustrating to me, and almost painful, because, for example, I climb as well. I teach English, but I climb as well. And, I decided to actually take an exam to actually have value in parents' eyes, because I believe that if I take that exam and actually pass it, they would trust me more, about taking their children to the climbing class. And when you climb, that teaches you so many things. It's so precious to just, have the class bond, which is something that I used to do with all my classes. But I remember 2 years back, there was one or two families that complained, well, she's an English teacher, why would she do this? And I'm like, don't you get it? Don't you get that just teaching is not a matter of just teaching your, English, but just having everybody bond, because this is, if you can get somebody's trust, that you should just have the perfect space to actually be relevant and to make a difference, and even if you're the worst teacher, if you get the connection, then you can do whatever you wish, even with that English thing. There are a lot of my students that I meet years after that comes to me, they come to me and say, oh, this is my English teacher, and I feel to be honest, if you ask me, I feel like I suck in teaching English. I know, maybe it's just judgment. I don't feel like I'm not the best teacher, but I'm really so involved that it doesn't matter. But I'm really yearning and craving to help people see and understand that. But I don't know about UK, in France, it's, people can be so conservative. This is so difficult to just, help them to understand, hey, you guys,
But it's taking, so this is a model that I put in my school. My school is not everyone else's school. So it's taking what works for your culture. That might be one facet of this to begin with. Because what we do is, if we're looking at this big picture, your head's ready to explode. Well, how do I do that, right? Some schools, administration, are going to be easier to kind of go with, and others, it's going to be an uphill battle like all get out. But one thing, and whether that's focusing on the climbing that you want to provide to kids, that's about relationships. If it's one kid that's been inspired, rock on. And too often we get disheartened. If I could seriously write a book about the discussions I would have with parents, because I did some weird stuff. I tried to start a surf club at my school. We would do smashing pumpkins. What are you doing? And around Halloween, and we had kids who were frustrated and stressed out, so we'd make jack-o'-lanterns, and they had the best time. They're smashing pumpkins. And what are you doing smashing pumpkins? Well, are we lighting a house on fire? No, we're not. So we're smashing pumpkins, right? So you're going to have people who think you're weird, and what are you doing? You're supposed to stay in your compartment. And I would say, right, if I stay in my office all day, I'm doing something wrong. And if everybody likes me, I'm doing something wrong. But that's how we have to look at it, because if we're really going to be effective, right, we're going to ruffle feathers. And the majority in this day and age are not going to be like, let's talk about our feelings. They're not, right? They're going to say, what are you doing? Why are you working outside of the classroom with my kids? It's weird and strange. We need to be weird and strange when it comes to prevention and relationships with our kids. We do. Because they're so desensitized to things through social media. They're so inundated with heartache with so many facets of life. We need to step outside of that and do something different. And you've got to do whatever works in your program. My culture, my school is not yours, bottom line. Or your facility, whatever the heck it is, it's different. I did a whole curriculum, and I feel like from the bottom of my heart, like anything you do and implement, it's got to have the right ingredients,
I think as well it makes it so much more difficult when people have got a closed sort of mindset, then it's a lot more challenging to be able to, ultimately you would hope that the parent wants the best for their child, and if they've got very tunnel vision about where you're there to teach a particular subject, like English or something like that, but it's like, but if your child's actually not learning and taking in that subject, there's probably a reason for that. And this, particular task or whatever we're doing, whether it's climbing or whatever, may facilitate something, and things aren't black and white, Learning happens in all sorts of places and not just in a classroom.
I think also being generous with your assumption that their kind of fear comes from not knowing, right? So maybe going, actually, maybe we don't know. If I just really spell it out what exactly my plan is, intentionally, rather than just something.
And they're not gonna, some people need a little bit more cushioning and a little bit more hand-holding than others, don't they?
Very much so. Yeah, absolutely. Everybody's and it is and in every school there's different hearts. I say fight like heck to be around people, other faculty members who are positive. That might only be one other person, because the negative, the bickering, the gossip is, to me, it's toxic. It's toxic. And toxic only disheartens us. Why am I doing this? It's only one kid. It's one kid. It's one human being. To think about that ripple effect when it comes to who are they going to come in contact in their life, and who are they. And when we kind of look at it in that way, I think, I mean, positive, I believe with the bottom of my heart, positive is everything. And negative, man, just strips you down and makes you feel funky and alone. It does. And when, you know, I think, kind of going back to social media, you know, I've spent a lot of time the past few days just watching people, whether I'm in the tubes or I'm walking, and it's like, we're all on our phones all the time, man. And I don't mean that as a total negative. We have so many lonely people. And when we kind of begin to make eye contact, when we begin to say, you know what, I'm going to go through, can I tell you what I did? I went through my roster at my school. This is who I'm going to track down. This is who I'm going to be investing my lunchtime in when I have 21 and a half minutes. This is who, you know, when the stuff hits, these people. And I veered away from people that I just viewed as toxic. Because when I'm dealing with, you know, 3 suicide ideations a week, you know, I'm got to find a kid at home because they're living in a car in the middle of the woods, to whatever, a kid I think is being human trafficked. You do not have time to be around negative people, because what happens, you're expending energy that could be expended and invested in a kid. And our kids matter. Any other questions?
I don't work in schools. I'm a student at the moment studying positive psychology, and I'd love to, which is effectively positive psychology is
positive.
Is the one
Rock on.
you know, make it work as best you can. And I'd love to get into schools and do something like this. Last year I was volunteering and going into schools and doing the one in, one out, you know, you're in and you're out.
And I'm not bashing that. I really am not, because I've done that before,
no,
you know.
We did the feedback and the kids all said, yeah, we want to run with it, but no one's supporting.
Yeah.
So it's hopeless. So I want to go in and do a program exactly like what you're doing, positive psychology, and, you know, make it work for my community. But in your opinion, I mean, I've never worked in a school. So, like, I don't know, I want to try and get into the schools, but I want to be in there every week, doing something every week.
And that's what is required. So it's having a, use it like open-minded or receptive, and making the least amount of ripples to teachers and administration as possible.
I want to say, all you need to do is trust me and give me space and kids. That's all you need to do. But I mean, it's almost like where to start, because I don't know the community, I don't know the young people. You know, I just want to help kids to make better decisions about themselves.
Yeah.
So
Make good decisions. Make good decisions.
That's it.
Email me, and we'll chat.
If I may say something about that, you know, as a teacher, I think that we also need to be very careful about the way we come to teach us. Teachers can be like very arrogant animals, I may say, and I was in a meeting like last week that was funny about addiction, and that lady was like really great. No sex, you know, and she was great, yeah. But it was my class, and it was during my hour, and I was giving that to her, and I was very happy to give that to her. But she, the way she just came across was harsh. And she actually treated me as if I was a child, I was a student. So she said like, whatever. But I felt like that was very not relevant and really insensitive. So what I'm saying is that especially when you're not a teacher, if you want to go in an institution and you want to get involved, it has to be done like very carefully.
Well, one of the things I suggest, even I did with my own faculty, is having a meeting with the teachers. It will be 7.5 minutes. I will not keep you long because time is of the essence. And saying, I need you with this. I know you don't know me. I'm invested because we are a team. And if you just come in guns a-blazing, we're like, I'm going to save children, and we're going to talk about, you're taking them out of their class, which is their class, you're going to have some issues. I know we're kind of winding down here. If anyone has any further questions, please feel free to email me at goodnesschick.com or Erin at goodnesschick.com. I am all things Goodness Chick on social media. I also have a podcast that I hope you can kind of get on board and listen to, that's all thing goodness and mental health. and it's on iTunes and Stitcher and Podbean and things that I don't remember. But really, when our mission is about goodness and our mission is about trying to change the world, we need each other. We really do, because sometimes we can, I think, feel isolated, feel tired, and something like this in terms of this conference is all about kind of getting recharged. So if you have any further questions after today, you can get me at Anything Goodness Chick. Sound good? Yep. All right, thank you guys very much.